For some people, the benefits of staying sick are greater than getting better.
Across the board, even outside of MS, 100%.
They have never been treated because nobody before us has looked at them as a whole human being.
After a challenging MS diagnosis, Karen Dwyer, internationally certified coach and TEDx speaker, underwent a profound transformation, addressing her mental, physical, and emotional well-being to now live symptom-free.
Oh my goodness, am I going to end up in a wheelchair? It really started affecting everything because my nervous system was shredded. My confidence was buried 6 foot under, and I was terrified.
The first thing out of your mouth was, I reversed my MS. What was the turning point for you?
I felt that jolt of a wake-up call. That particular day that I was going to make a commitment to make myself happy. And I was making a commitment to reverse my symptoms, and I wanted to help other people do the same. It was ugly. Healing wasn't pretty, but I'm really glad that I did it.
Welcome to Prescribing the Truth. I'm Dr. Nichole Morris, a Catholic naturopathic doctor and natural fertility expert. Around here, we don't just accept the mainstream narrative, we question it. My goal with every episode is to share the love of Jesus with you and empower you to make informed, confident decisions for you and your family. So grab a cup of tea, get comfy, maybe even throw on your tin hat, and let's dive in. Welcome back to Prescribing the Truth. I'm Dr. Nichole Morris. Super excited to have my friend Karen Dwyer here with me today. I've known Karen for a few years, and she has become a good friend of mine. And more importantly than that, Karen is a multiple sclerosis expert, the founder of MS to Success. And I am just honored and thrilled to have you here with me today, Karen. So thanks for coming to hang out and talk with us about MS.
So I was tickled when you asked me to be a guest. So thank you. It's great to be here. I love the podcast.
Thank you. It's been an exciting launch. Let's dive in and talk about you today. I'm going to let you share your story. Talk to me a little bit about your story and kind of what that diagnosis was like for you. I have to presume they kind of left you initially under the assumption that MS was a life sentence, but you did not succumb to that diagnosis, and I'm incredibly proud of you for that. But dive in, share with us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, look, I suppose having reversed MS, I had a diagnosis when I turned 30, but looking back now at the symptoms that I had, I probably had it for 10 to 15 years before that and didn't know. I didn't know what, to do or how to handle the symptoms. And so when I had the diagnosis, there was quite a bit of relief because it was like, okay, I'm not going crazy. There's a name to put on this. And of course, then I had fear because my only understanding, and I feel ignorant saying this, but my understanding was, oh my goodness, am I going to end up in a wheelchair? And then there was something where I knew that I just had some hope. I knew that I had some hope there, and I'd had some interesting life experiences before that. So I kind of figured, okay, this is not your first rodeo. And if anything, you're going to deal with this in a different way than you have with anything else before. You're not taking this lying down. Yeah, my experience was, maybe start adjusting your home. There's nothing you can do. And and my neurologist was beautiful, by the way, like a really lovely man. So this is where I find it tricky because I have so much respect for the medical model, but then there are so many parts that I have so many issues with. I think it's amazing for acute medicine, but everyday lifestyle medicine. And I suppose that's why my company exists now, to bridge the gap between everyday life and the medical model, because it just isn't supported. But my own experience was born from complete frustration and fear because I used to go in, and of course then you go and Google symptoms, you go and Google what you can do. So I was going back into my neurologist like a good student and saying, is there any merit in vitamin D? What about diet? What about protein? And he was just like, oh, no, not really. Like there are some studies done on vitamin D, but just go home and inject yourself with the beta interferons that I was prescribed. And my body rejected them. And I felt like a bad patient, but I used to have to, I was managing a radio station, running a radio station at the time and a team there. And I used to inject myself once a week on this particular medication. And so I would do it on a Friday because I wanted to continue working and try and give it my best. So I'd show up to work every day. I'd do a really good job. And then Friday evening, I had to take paracetamol an hour before injecting myself because I knew that my body was going to try and reject it. And then every 4 hours I'd have to take it because my body would start convulsing and shaking and sweating and I'd get flu symptoms. So every weekend was spent feeling miserable and awful and having all of these reactions. And I know not everybody has those reactions. So it's really important for me to say that and be balanced about it, because some people have no reactions whatsoever and they do really well. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those. So I spent the whole weekend suffering and not sleeping, and then being really tired during the day and trying to look after my 2 young kids, do the washing, have a job, partner, all of that stuff. And just by the time Sunday evening came around, I just started to feel a little bit better. And so then I'd rock back into work on Monday, ready to go. And so I did that for quite a while, thinking this is just the way it has to be. But it really started affecting everything, your confidence. If I was ever asked to go to an event or go out with my friends or trips or anything, I couldn't, because my nervous system was shredded. My confidence was buried 6 foot under. I had symptoms like optic neuritis, heavy legs, numbness, tingling. And I was diagnosed. The reason that I had my diagnosis in the first place was because my whole left side went numb. And I recognized it because I woke up first one morning and I couldn't feel that part of my arm. And so I went to the emergency room and they said, unless it's something really sinister, you've probably just slept on it wrong. And they could kind of see by me visually that I wasn't happy with that. So they said they'd schedule in an outpatient MRI. But then a couple of days later, I was taking a shower. And as I was drying my hair, I realized I couldn't feel the heat from the hairdryer on my head. And then I started touching my body and feeling panicked. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, am I having a stroke? What's going on here? I packed a bag. And this always makes me teary because I knew that there was something wrong then. And so I packed a hospital bag because I knew I wasn't coming home that day. And I didn't tell my partner. I didn't say anything to the kids. I just said, are you okay for a day? And this is midweek as well. So I knew, okay, work and everything else is going to have to halt. But as soon as I went in, they gowned me up. They brought me down in a wheelchair. And I was really claustrophobic at the time. So they had to sedate me for an MRI. And then they wheeled me back up into a smaller room. And it was then that I knew they were giving me some bad news, because otherwise I was on like a triage kind of ward. And so I remember the doctor saying to me that the number of lesions I had on my brain would have been normal for an 80-year-old. And I was 30. And I'm sitting there in a hospital gown. And of course I had started Googling, as I do, and I don't recommend anybody does that. It's really not good for anybody most of the time. It came up with multiple sclerosis, and he mentioned demyelination. I didn't know what it was then, and I asked if it was MS, and he said the likelihood is, but we'll need to do a lumbar puncture or a spinal tap in order to really confirm the proteins in your spinal fluid. So they kept me in, and it was from then on that I spent quite a few years in and out of hospital. I had so many relapses, and I was terrified because I felt like it was that point that I handed over my sovereignty because I didn't have an understanding. I wasn't qualified in that. I'd no experience of it. I didn't know anybody with it. And anybody I mentioned it to got really upset. In fact, what I dealt with was, and my family are incredible, but all of them were so worried and so upset and so scared that I jumped into having them looked after and making sure that they weren't worried, that I turned it into, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I've got this. And so I internalized a lot of that subconsciously. Yeah. But I spent the next few years pretending that I was okay. But then when I'd go to bed at night, all of those worries came up. So yeah, it was, God, I haven't cried about this in a very long time. You're a good interviewer.
Well, I feel really honored that you're here crying about this with me, Karen. So thank you for sharing that. I know it can be difficult to dive into those places in our heart sometime and share those really vulnerable pieces of our story with each other, but with the world, right? You were in this situation in which you had this really horrific diagnosis, right? I'm sure that felt like a life sentence. You had two little girls at the time. What was the turning point for you? You mentioned that you went through a few years in and out of the hospital, but what was really the turning point that made you say, or was there a moment that made you say, like, okay, this no more. This doesn't define me. I can't live like this for the rest of my life here.
I would say there's two big ones. The first one was definitely a life-defining moment, and my partner walked out on Christmas Day. That was like, oh my goodness. Then I'd given up my job, which again was my identity. So all of a sudden then I was jobless, partnerless, moneyless. And my confidence again just took another dive. And I spent, a bit of time eating my emotions because I didn't know what else to do. I'm like, I just wanted to comfort myself. And then a couple of weeks later, thankfully, somebody asked me, this is so funny, what I was grateful for. And I remember feeling really agitated by the question because I thought, well, how dare you ask that? Like, I've just had this happen. And it was at that moment that I feel like light, God, whatever anybody wants to call that, I felt that jolt of a wake-up call. And I wrote down in my journal, I still have it, it's behind me, that particular day that I was going to make a commitment to make myself happy. And I was making a commitment to reverse my symptoms, and I wanted to help other people do the same. And 1 year almost to the day, bearing in mind that a year before this, so a year before my partner had walked out, I had an acute brain infection where I collapsed driving on the highway. And the medication that I was on, even though it didn't have that many side effects, it opened me up to a much more serious infection. So I had an infection on my brain, I had acute labyrinthitis, and my liver count was 7 times higher than it should have been. So I had to come off the medication. And so I really was SHIT creek without a paddle. So I had spent that year eating my emotions, not feeling good, trying out becoming vegan, failing miserably, feeling like I was just doing a really awful job at having myself looked after. And I feel like I gave up in a sense. Partner walking out, a couple of weeks later, what are you grateful for? I wrote down that I wanted to commit to make myself happy. A year later, I'm in my neurologist's office, and they're watching me closely at this point because I'm not on medication, and I had quite a few relapses before then. And he asked me what I'd been doing, and I'm watching his body language. How is he breathing? Is he going to give me bad news? What's going on? So I tell him everything from practicing gratitude to vitamin D to moving to different supplements to cellular health to, I mean, you name it. I'm going down a list, and I'm probably speaking quite fast at this point because I'm nervous with them. And he said, okay, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it because all of your lesions have shrunk. They're barely visible. And I said, am I cured? I said, no, we don't use that word. And he started getting really flustered. I said, okay, well, can you give me a word? I said, am I in remission? He said, we don't use that other word either. I said, oh, you're going to have to give me a word. Sometimes people in their 50s or 60s, the disease can naturally fizzle out and leave the body. And you've had that now. You've had burnout. So whatever you're doing, keep doing. It's incredible. And he said, you don't really need to come back to me, but you're welcome. You're welcome to come back and review if you want.
Yes.
Phenomenal, right?
Ultimately. So what, do you have lesions now? No lesions.
All shrunk.
Amazing.
All shrunk. Yeah,
amazing.
Phenomenal. I've had this happen with clients as well. We have, and this is the thing, because if I'm really honest, Nichole, when that happened to me first, there was a little part of me going, is this wild? Like what's going on? How's this possible? And I got a bit of blowback if I said to someone, oh, well, I remember there was one particular lady, I was at an event, and my friend introduced me to this lady. I remember her so vividly. She had this beautiful hair and this gorgeous red dress on her. My friend introduced me and said, oh, this is, I won't say her name. She's after raising 50,000 for her friend to do stem cell therapy, who has MS. And I was like, oh my God, amazing. That's so good. And then my friend said, and this is Karen. She reversed it. And the woman got so cross. She said, you can't reverse it. She got really angry. So angry that I had soup in my hand. And because I got such a fright, I ended up spilling it all over myself. I had to go and excuse myself, but I got such a shock at someone's reaction to something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. I found myself wanting to share it and then also being afraid to say it because of people's reactions too. So, sorry, the reason I say this is we, in MS to Success, and I tell you this because we've seen it over and over again, that it's not a mystery anymore to us. But we had one particular client, her name is Sarah, and she's gorgeous. She's a biology teacher. And when she came to us, she'd had a lot of stressful things going on, but she had a major, major lesion on her spine. And she didn't know what to do. And because our program is evidence-based and science-based, but we have a holistic approach as well, she was really skeptical. And I have the text on my phone, that lesion is gone. She's a science teacher, a skeptical science teacher. And in that time when she was doing our program, her grandmother died. She had pregnancy that didn't come to pass, unfortunately. And she also moved house. So even in the midst of all of those three things happening whilst she was doing our program, that lesion still disappeared.
Such incredible work that you're doing, Karen. I want to go back. You mentioned a couple of things that I think are very powerful. One thing that you just mentioned is how triggered that woman was. I heard your friend say, this is Karen, she reversed her MS, right? And I think that so many people may be able to relate to that even outside of MS. And I find this in my own program in the fertility space that we're working in, is that people, they thrive off of a diagnosis. They really want to know that there's like this big, bad, scary thing happening or just like a name to identify what's going on, right? I think sometimes that brings people peace and it starts to identify they allow it to identify who they are, right? Or to represent who they are as humans. And so part of the work that I think we're both doing is peeling back the layer and saying this diagnosis doesn't define you. You can set yourself free from this if you choose, right? And even hearing me say that right now may be triggering because there may be people listening who feel like they've tried to set themselves free and still haven't been able to. And I think the point there is it's a journey, right? And maybe you just haven't encountered the person that's going to guide you in that or the specific steps that you need to take. Something else that I think that you said was really powerful, kind of on that same note, the first thing out of your mouth was, I reversed my MS with so much confidence, right? And just knowing that you could do that. And I think that that is so much of what health comes down to is having so much confidence, like in your soul. You don't have to live like that forever. It doesn't have to define you. Even when the conventional medical model tells us there is no cure, you can't go into remission, you're going to live like this forever, prepare your house and get a wheelchair, right? Ultimately, still at the end of the day, like you get to choose. And that can be hard to, if you haven't thought that way before, that can be hard to take in.
And you know what? It can be hard for people to take in, but the other layer of that then is the other people around them. It's hard for them to take in too. I spoke to a person before on a call and he was about to sign up, and I had a vicious call from his sister-in-law saying that she was going to report me if I ever contacted him again and ever gave him any ridiculous hope. What the hell? So the people that you're surrounding yourself with are absolutely essential in your recovery journey as 100%. Well. I mean,
and
so
that's
much
for
so.
any condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
any
think
condition.
That's such a good point to make, Karen. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned feeling like when you got that diagnosis, relief and identification of what was going on. Talk to me a little bit more about how that felt, because we're kind of saying right now, right, is the diagnosis doesn't define you, but I can totally see how having the diagnosis, I see that in the infertility space too. I don't like the diagnosis of unexplained infertility, and my clients despise that even more, right? When they come to me, they're very much looking for this big explanation. And sometimes there isn't a big explanation, like maybe there is with MS, because we can see lesions in the brain with MS, right? And it's all the little basic things. But just talk me through, like, what was that like for you when you got that diagnosis and could feel that relief?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know what? Because I had been feeling off, that's probably the only way I could describe it. I knew there was something that wasn't right, but I couldn't quite verbalize what it was. You're then questioning your sanity. You're questioning your reflection of yourself and how you're actually feeling. And then you're wondering, is it hormonal? Is it just tiredness? Is it just parenthood? Is it because I'm in a relationship that isn't healthy? What is it? So when I got that, it was like, okay, I'm not going crazy. I have a name to put on those symptoms and I'm not going, insane. And then, and you worded it brilliantly earlier on, there's that juxtaposition of, okay, I have the diagnosis, but I also don't want to be defined by it. And one of the things I say, when I say, for example, when a client comes to me and they say, my MS, I'm like, no, it's not your MS. You do not associate that it is yours. You're going to remove that. You're going to say the name of the thing, that the diagnosis that you were given is actually just the name of a group of symptoms that they've gathered together and put these two words on it. And for a lot of people, and we see it, like we have medical practitioners who are our clients, they have never been treated the way that they have with our work, because nobody before us has looked at them as a whole human being, has looked at them as their whole ecosystem, the people around them, how they sleep, what they eat, how they're feeling, their beliefs about what's possible, how they're moving, their daily lifestyle. Nobody has looked or cared in detail to look at the whole picture. So it is so foreign to people. So that juxtaposition of dividing themselves, and this is why we interview everybody before we work with them, because for some, and this might be an inflammatory thing, but I'm going to say it anyway, for some people, the benefits of staying sick are greater than getting better.
Across the board, even outside of MS. 100%.
I'm gonna share something really private, and I don't know that I've ever shared this publicly before. I was on an invalidity pension because I had to give up work at a point because my health was deteriorating. My career was going like that and my health was going down the other way. So I went on an invalidity pension. I then had an opportunity to get a huge amount of tax back on a car that I had bought, because if it was adapted just a teeny tiny bit, I got this massive chunk of money back. And I decided I wasn't going to do that, because otherwise I felt like I was making this agreement with the universe or with God that I am staying sick. So I gave that up. Also, when I got better, I went to like our social welfare office, you call it in Ireland, and said, okay, I'm better. I don't need to be on this invalidity pension anymore. And they said, oh, but you're crazy. You can get a free house. You can get, this thing for the rest of your life. It's not means test. I was like, I'm better. I want to I don't want to be receiving something that I shouldn't be. Yeah. And they made me go to another interview. They didn't want to take me off it. The person was trying to get me to stay on that payment. And then they put me on this partial capacity to give me 6 months to do it. And then I came off that again. But that's the route that I have to go. I firmly believe that if I had, and it's not, here's just a little asterisk points, anybody that is on that and genuinely needs it, it is an amazing help. I'm not saying that nobody should claim when they need help. Absolutely do get the support that you need. That's what had me allow myself get to a point. But I also think that if I had have stayed in that position and said, oh no, screw it, I'm just going to stay keeping the money and I think I would have stayed ill. I think I would have kept some of those symptoms. I really do. And that was hard when I'm a broke mom living in my house, single with 2 kids and no job, to say, no, thank you to money. I want to go back and start earning. It was scary, but I'm really glad that I did it.
Always proud of you, Karen. I have so much respect for you, but that's just like a whole new layer. I have so much respect for you because I think that just defines the type of person that you are, right? But also at the same time, I'm certain that you are correct, that if you would have stayed in that mindset, you would have stayed sick. And this just demonstrates so deeply how our choices from the moment we wake up until we close our eyes at night influence our health, whether that seems like a direct health-related decision or not, right? That was a mindset decision that you had to make. You chose not to have the mindset that you were going to be defined, I guess, by the diagnosis, and that you were going to step outside of that and claim your health and claim what you wanted, right? And that was also, in a sense, even if you didn't know it at the time, claiming what you have now in freedom and being an entrepreneur and helping other people with MS to live, originally with MS to live in freedom as well. That's an incredible piece of your story.
Yeah. But do you know what the thing that I would like to share is, it wasn't pretty. When we think about healing and you think, oh, someone like prancing through a meadow, it was ugly. Healing wasn't pretty because I had to deal with myself. I had to deal with my emotions. I had to deal with, trauma from my past. And I actually had to force myself to process it. That's not pretty. It's not pretty. And it's definitely not comfortable. I mean, I feel like, and by the way, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my ass being like, I'm so good and I dealt with it. I don't mean it like that. I suppose what I'm trying to say is I think sometimes we think healing is like baths and diffusers and candles and, being really kind to yourself. Yeah, but actually sometimes being kind to yourself is doing the hard thing or having the hard conversation or actually recognizing that you're being a bit of a jerk, whatever that looks like, and taking responsibility and accountability for it.
Healing is not pretty. I think that paints clarity for people, Karen. Healing is not pretty, regardless of what you are healing from. The end might be pretty. The end is pretty, right? But the journey from where you are today to your healed self is not a straight line, and it's not pretty. It requires really hard work. And for people that want true healing, that doesn't just happen on the surface level of our health. That's digging into your mental, emotional, spiritual layers of who you are as a human and going all the way back to that emotional trauma that you have experienced. And we could talk about this in length too, but one thing that I am often describing to my clients is that when I think about illness and how someone got sick, I first think, okay, you are sick. What drives illness? The first thing I think of is infection, right? Whether that's bacterial infections, parasites, molds, chemicals, like something is in your body that shouldn't be there, right? But why were you and I in the same situation at the same time and I got sick and you didn't? Why was my body more weak in that moment, right? And then that takes me back to the emotional level of like, what traumas or emotional experiences did I have in my life that you didn't? Or how did I suppress emotional experiences, especially with something like MS that is a condition or disease or dysfunction of the nervous system, of the neurological system, right? That's the central nervous system being affected. connected. So we have to go back to all of those layers and really get to the root cause. And healing on that emotional level of childhood trauma or relationship trauma or whatever it is, like that is never going to be easy and or pretty. And you've just got to decide that you're willing to do the work, right?
Yeah, it totally is. And most people, interestingly, and it's such a great point, most people, when they come to us, they think like, oh, you're going to tell me how to move and what to eat. And I'm like, well, yeah, but actually that's not the part that we're going to start with. We're going to get to know you first and know, what's working and what's not. And most of the time people don't know what that is because, you can't see the label when you're inside the jar. You don't know what that is because they're your blind spots. We need to get to know what's actually going on. And like you said it perfectly, for each person, it's completely different. And that's why we personalize all of our work. And it's not one size fits all. In fact, I think there is no integrity in all of these cookie cutter programs to exercise more and eat this and don't eat that. It's BS if you're not taking care of the human being and what they're dealing with. Because you could say exactly the same thing as you said. You could say, give the same instructions to two people and one might absolutely thrive and one might be completely confronted and self-sabotage because of whatever has happened in their past. Somebody else might do exactly the same things. And like you say, they might have a bacterial infection or their gut health could be in absolute ribbons and they're never going to get anywhere unless you actually go a little bit deeper on that. It has to be personalized. And if it's not, run a mile.
And that's exactly why the conventional medical model doesn't work, right? Because it's cookie cutter, one size fits all, stays superficial and suppressive. Ultimately, it's not going deeper than the physical level, if you will.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Fertility Formula Masterclass. My team and I have helped hundreds of married couples conceive naturally without IUI or IVF. If you're struggling to get pregnant or stay pregnant and have been told there are no other options, don't stop searching. There is hope, and finding the root cause is key. If you want to learn more about how we can support you on your journey to motherhood, head over to drnicholemorris.com, and don't forget, Nichole has an H in it. All right, let's get back to the show.
I do want to repeat something that you said because I think it's so powerful and I want people to hear it again. But you said something to the effect of, do not call it my MS. And that is something that I reiterate over and over again with my clients on my platform is don't claim it, which I think is exactly what you said too, Karen. It doesn't define you. It is not yours. It's just happening to you in the moment, right? I hear this a lot with anxiety. People will say like my anxiety or my depression, and it's not yours. It doesn't define you. So I really encourage you, if you're listening to this and maybe MS is not even something of concern to you or on your radar. And if that's the case, I'm even more thrilled that you're still here listening because I think so much of what we're speaking about right now applies to health in general. And so if you are someone experiencing some of these other things, just as a reminder to yourself, try to catch yourself in those moments and have that internal dialogue correction of like, oh wait, that's not mine. That's just happening. The anxiety is just happening right now. So I think that could just be a key takeaway for anybody that's listening here. I want to talk a little bit more about root causes. Obviously, we've covered this mental and emotional piece. What do you see as some of the other root causes that are more obvious to people in terms of infections or other experiences? What are the first things that come to mind for you?
The first thing is like a toxic overload. Like, I want to know what is going on. What are you putting into your body? What are you putting on with your body? What are you using around your home? What chemicals are there? If there has been vaccines, over the last little while, things like that. And I'm almost afraid to say that word because of all of the stuff that's going on with it. But that's a really important one to look at.
Yeah.
Really, really important one to look at. And is there a detox needed? And a heavy metals cleanse, parasite cleanse, things like that. We've got to make sure that the system is actually clear before we start doing anything else. And then, like you said, there's so many different arenas for it. Like, it's very rare for me to have a client that hasn't had an unhealed emotional trauma. Very rare that I see someone that hasn't got that. But then, is it rare for any human to go through life unscathed with an emotional trauma either? And I don't mean to laugh about it, but like everybody has their story, right? Yeah. I believe that, and there are so many different pathways that, 99% of the time we can look at why, and the person will get to the point where they can see root cause. But then we see it, and the 5-6 really pillars of health that we focus on is mindset, sleep, nutrition, self-care, movement, and not just your ordinary movement, because most of the time people end up moving too much and then they exhaust themselves and then there's more of an inflammatory response and then they're all the way back down to the beginning feeling embarrassed or ashamed about themselves because they haven't been able to keep up, when particularly as a female they shouldn't have been doing that much exercise anyway, and nobody has even spoken about hormones to any of them most of the time. It baffles me. But anyway, no. So when they come to us, we're doing a whole, I don't know what you call it in the States. We call it an NCT or an MOT. What do you do when you go get a whole car service? There's another word for it. It's when you get your car checked to make sure that it's still working. Anyway, we'll go back. We'll find a word for it.
I don't know if there's an equation here or an
there might not be. There might not be.
Or maybe I just don't know cars.
Yeah, but our approach has to be whole health, because sometimes it's only, somebody might do a heavy metals cleanse, or somebody else might do a parasite cleanse, or somebody might not need any of those and they might just need to repair their gut in general or their microbiome. But even with those things are quite easy to see, to measure, you can see it. It's very clear. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is in a lot of times where people don't recognize that there have been patterns that have built up over years, and they don't realize that that is actually contributing to this inflammatory response in their body. So it is working out what the puzzle is, what the pieces of the jigsaw are missing or maybe put in the incorrect way. And so that's why we look at, I'll give you an example. We've had a client recently and she wasn't sleeping, and we did everything around sleep. And then what we discovered was her husband was snoring like crazy. So actually what we had to do is have him looked after in managing his breath. We have a breath expert as well, and an insomnia and sleep expert. We've two of those and a sleep doctor. But we actually had to have him retrained for his sleep. Now she's sleeping, he's not snoring, and both of them are happier and healthier, and we're able to work. She's still in our program, so we're able to now work on her health because she's getting a full night's sleep. So some of the things are outside of control, and then some of them aren't. And then a lot of times what we see, people can be in a workplace where there's stressors, or it might be relationships and communication and boundaries. And when we have that looked after, we have a clinical hypnotherapist, we have a spiritual guide. So it's important that we deal with that and have somebody build that confidence up from the inside out, such that those become lifelong skills. Because if you're eating well, you're moving, you're sleeping well, but your nervous system is still dysregulated and you're anxious or you've got fear or anger there, well, we've really got to process that and make sure that you have the skills to go out into the world, because we don't want people living like monks and not going to restaurants or holidays or avoiding people because they don't want to get stressed because they might have a relapse. No, I need my clients to be able to deal with anything and everything so they trust themselves no matter what comes up in life.
Absolutely. And I think that what you really highlighted is back to the root cause, right? So it's the basics is really where we don't need to overcomplicate a lot of things, right? A lot of things in conventional medicine are far overcomplicated. And so we don't need to overcomplicate them. And going back to the root cause, I will say, however, in my personal life, everyone that I personally know that has been diagnosed with MS lived in an exceptionally moldy environment. Mold is a neurotoxin though, so the correlation makes sense. So that's just something that I've noticed, and I know there's a lot of research to support that, and parasitic infections. So again, it's like, why did your body, if you're experiencing these symptoms, why did your body succumb and the person next to you didn't, right? Something that I experience a lot in this environment is that women will have some symptoms worse than men, especially when mold is involved, because mold is an estrogen mimicker. So a lot of times people suffering from mold toxicity, their husband, not to generalize men, but often I just see it over and over again. The husband's like, you're crazy. Like, I'm fine. I'm not having any symptoms. I live here, so it must not be that big of a deal. And I think that's just kind of across the board. Would you say, Karen, that a lot of women before being diagnosed feel quote unquote crazy, or it's all in their head? Are they dismissed at that level like they are with some other conditions?
Yes, is the straight answer. And there's also a 4-to-1 ratio of women diagnosed than men.
Sure.
So it makes sense. I think there's an endocrine, I think there's a hormonal piece to that as well. I also think, and it's brilliant what you've said, but I also think women carry a different emotional load than men. And I think that's definitely then connected to nervous system that need to care for and then putting oneself at the bottom of a priority list and having everybody else's needs. And I think that's in society as well as everywhere else. And then, of course, like you say, being more open to mold infections, being open to many, many more things because of our makeup within our body. And even then, you know, when you look at childbirth and things like that, and then the recovery afterwards, I mean, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And it also leaves us depleted. And I know you have a program for afterwards when, you know, women have their babies as well. It is such an important time. Like, you know, that saying that it really does take a village. That afterbirth piece is so important, especially for first-time moms as well, because, I mean, we don't know what hit us, right? It's the most beautiful thing in the world.
Babies
and
don't come with a
juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Do you find that symptoms cycle for women with their menstrual cycle or with their hormone cycle? Do symptoms ebb and flow with that?
Yeah, they definitely exacerbate around that. And also menopause being a neurological shift as well. We definitely see a lot of doubling up of symptoms. So we have to be able to differentiate what is hormonal and what is MS. So we really bring in hormone balancing into the program as well and take that for peri-menopause and post-menopause as well. And we have different approaches for each 3 stages.
That's amazing. Yeah. And again, that speaks to the individuality of the care that you are giving to the people that you serve, right? And the same in most of the alternative medicine space is being more individualized in what we're doing so that our clients or patients are getting better care.
There's nothing worse than going somewhere. Like I've done fitness programs over the years, you know, ones that my friends have gone to, and there'll be like this massive group of people, you know, men, women, all different ages, sizes and all the rest. We're being told to do all of the same exercise. I remember like having what I now know to be like a cyst that burst and having this excruciating pain. And it was just like, oh, no, you're fine. It's probably just a muscle. You know when somebody cares about you. You know when somebody knows what they're doing. You know when somebody is guiding you with confidence and science and care and experience. And there is nothing worse than going somewhere and paying money when you're in a vulnerable position to look for care and you're not getting what it is that you need. It's why we have 18 different health practitioners, because I'm certainly not qualified in all those things. So we bring the best in the world to make sure that if one of us can't answer a question, that somebody else has an expert lead in it. And it's really important, like, you know, and we have a mutual friend and who always says you find the who, not the how. Because I think that's what people get obsessed with is how do I do it rather than finding the who that has already done it or knows how to, and letting yourself be guided. Anyway, sorry, I went off piece.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that that's so important. It's such a good reminder for those that are listening too. So just to repeat what you said is finding the who, not the how. You can overwhelm yourself on Google reading all about your symptoms, all the natural cures, quote unquote, for MS, all of the things, right? But you've probably never done this before if you're here listening, right? So who's the person that can take you on the journey so much faster and help you find that true healing so much faster? It might cost you a little bit of money, but then that's where you have to weigh the pros and cons for you specifically, right? Let's talk a little bit about the medications that are used for MS. I'd love to kind of just dive in and get your perspective. Do you see that they work? Do you see that they don't? Do you see that people, I know the answer. That was a rhetorical question. Okay. Do you see people have a lot of side effects? Like, just dive in and give me the overview of what do you see when it comes to pharmaceuticals and MS?
I always get a little bit panicked when I get asked this question. Okay, so that's what I really want to be straight about because it is such a sensitive topic. Here's how I'm going to say it, and then I'll tell you my personal experience with it. Okay, so what I will always say to my clients, and what I do is, like 50% of our clients are on medication. Well, maybe 40% of our clients are on medication. 60% not. And we have some people that are on medication and are doing fine. They're doing okay and they're improving, you know, through our program. And we have some clients who are on medication and want to come off. I then have other people who have come off or never taken it and never want to. And so we'll meet people where they're at, and it's not a problem for us to treat someone depending on where they're at. My personal experience is my symptoms and my experience of MS was so much worse when I was on medication versus when I wasn't.
So your experience is that the medications exacerbated your symptoms
and gave me probably 10 other ones. I also saw that me personally, the liver count being 7 times higher than it should have, the flu symptoms, the tiredness, the experience of it was horrendous. And I got worse rather than getting better. Have I seen that with other clients? Yes.
Yeah, those listening in the US, what Karen is saying about her liver is that her liver enzymes were 7 times higher than the normal limit. So likely in the hundreds in our units, Karen, not sure how it is in Ireland, but that would be AST, ALT if you're looking at a CBC of your own. Do you notice, Karen, or do you see a lot of infections that these patients experience because of the immunosuppression that comes along with so many of these medications?
One of our clients at the moment is dealing with pneumonia, who's on medication and hospitalized, she's a new enough client, and that's terrifying. That's terrifying. There's another person that I spoke to recently who was just about to go on medication, and then she has to beware of any potential harm to her immune system for 6 months. I mean, I think that's insane.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the mechanism of action of a lot of these drugs is to suppress immune function, which leaves you more susceptible to infections. And those in my personal life that I know with MS, when they get sick, they are sick. And also have elevated liver enzymes, all of them that I know. So it's very much these common patterns, but essentially the medications are there to force the immune system to shut off, to stop attacking self, essentially.
I think the thing to acknowledge is, I had this experience too, is that at the time of any diagnosis like that, where you feel out of control, undereducated on what it is and symptoms, and you feel scared, of course you're going to trust the person in the white coat that you're under their care and has a lot more education than you. You're going to say, yeah, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Of course you are. I mean, my younger self was like, oh my God, great, just give it to me, because I wanted to get better. So you don't see the gap between where you are and where you want to get to. You just hear solution. So of course, it seems like the educated thing to do. When I came off medication, even my mom was getting really cross. She's like, you have to be on that. I mean, I had to fight my whole family, my entire family. And that was really hard because I had everybody around me, the medical professional and team. I even had the drug company call me and tell me that if I didn't continue to take it, that I was going to end up in a wheelchair. And then all of my family being worried and scared and telling me that I should go on to another one. That's frightening. So I totally relate to anybody that is taking medication, because I get that they're doing it in good faith. They're doing it.
Indoctrination, though, too, Karen. Their indoctrination, like all the way down to the level of the pharmaceutical company calling you on the phone and fear-mongering you to the point of, if you don't continue to pay us money and take our pharmaceutical drug, you are going to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. Like, that's a lot to swallow, just that piece right there, right?
I cried for days.
Rightfully so. That's scary, right? And the indoctrination is beyond you, because your family has been indoctrinated also to believe that if you don't take the drug, you're also going to be in a wheelchair or die. Then they're sad, so it is this domino effect. And I think what you experienced is what so many experience across medicine in the conventional world.
Yeah, it's frightening. Here's the point that I want to make, because I always want to have a balanced point of view as well. There are some medications out there that are amazing and do help different things. My experience was not that, unfortunately. Just to be balanced about it. Like, I will take an antibiotic if I need to, but those ones, not for me. I haven't ever seen anyone improve solely on medication.
Do you find that these medications are hard for people to come off of?
They can be. Not all of them, but they have to be tapered, and they have to be under the guidance of someone who knows what they're doing with the medication, for sure. And also a lot of them, I had a client who wanted to have another baby, and she had to be off a medication for 18 months before she did it. I mean, if that doesn't tell you the level of toxicity in that, I mean, that's frightening.
Yeah, I have a few clients right now that have MS in the same situation. They cannot be on pharmaceuticals during pregnancy. So I think that speaks to the toxicity of the medication itself. Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that you would really love to dig into in the world of MS? Anything else that you would like to share?
I think because there's so many females with it, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit, the 4-to-1 ratio. And we specialize in working with women. But I think the thing that I see quite often, and this is the part that I get upset by when I hear my team coming back and saying, oh no, this person's not going to do it because, they want to go on a holiday with their family instead of having their health looked after. And I get it. Everybody wants, that joy and the break from all of it, but it bothers me. And whether it's with me or with someone else, by the way, so I say this, it doesn't matter whether it's my company or somebody else's. just to please don't wait to prioritize yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a client that's in with pneumonia at the moment, and she's in her late 60s. And she said, and she's only in the program a little while, she said, I wish I did this 30 years ago. I wish I did this 30 years ago with tears in her eyes. And so it's that point, you know, especially young women that have maybe just been diagnosed, and the likelihood is they probably have kids or want to have kids.
Yeah.
Please do not prioritize everybody else instead of yourself first. It's like that airplane mask analogy. You've got to put on your own before you look after everyone else. And that's really hard. It's really hard when you're responsible for young people and work and relationship and all of those lovely things. But that's probably, and I think that's probably worldwide, whether you're dealing with a chronic illness or whatever it might be that you're up to. I just want women to hear that in particular.
Yes, that's beautiful. What lies do you feel that women with MS have been told about themselves or tell themselves?
I think the lie that I hear most often is they're told that there's nothing that they can do. And that pisses me off. Because what it does is it keeps someone stuck and it keeps someone scared. There's so many programs out there that have been, and men are amazing, by the way, so this isn't a men-hating thing. I love my partner, or all of that. But there's so many programs out there that have been designed for men, but they're given to men and women. And so women then go and do these things, and then they end up feeling like a failure because they're not able to keep up. They end up more inflamed. Then they feel embarrassed or ashamed, and then they feel hopeless because they haven't been able to keep up. So then they just don't bother trying. And that is very frustrating.
And that's truly medicine across the board. Also, the lab reference ranges that we use conventionally are based on middle-aged white men. Women are overall excluded from research, even today. And so I think that's such a great reminder, Karen, that what has been developed for men cannot be applied to us as women. And if you are listening and really asking why, and that's not obvious, men's hormones cycle on a 24-hour cycle. Every morning when they wake up, their cycle starts all over. They get a boost of testosterone, they feel good, decreases through the day, they go to bed, wake up, it starts all over again, right? But us as women, we cycle on a 28-day rhythm, give or take a few days, right? So something that's developed or based on a 24-hour hormone cycle doesn't apply to someone with a 28 to 32-day hormone cycle. It's just physiologically not logical. And so I think that that's really important for us to remember across the board, whatever health concern you're facing, that you need to make sure, be your own best advocate, right? This is always the most important. You have to be your own best advocate, but make sure what is being recommended to you or applied to you is actually for a female and not for a male. And you will have greater chance of success. Absolutely.
Yeah, you said that so much better than I did, Nichole. Thanks.
I don't think that that's true, but... Well, Karen, thank you so much for being with me here today, all the way from Ireland. Maybe next time we're together here in the States, we'll have to record an episode together face to face in studio. That would be
And all of my clients are in the US as well, so I definitely need to come back. Like,
yes,
90% of our clients are US and Canada, so definitely we'll have to do that in person. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here. Such an inspiration that you are, Karen, to me and to all of those that are listening. Such an example of taking control, defining your success, not letting other people do that for you. So it's an honor to chat with you. How can people find you? I'm sure there will be people that want to find you. What's the best way to do that?
Instagram, Facebook is I am Karen Dwyer. They can go to karendwyer.com or if they want to, watch the masterclass, things like that, or have an assessment with any of our team or myself, it's ms2success.com, mstosuccess.com.
Incredible. We will make sure that links to reach Karen are in the description of this video as well. So again, thanks for being here with us today, Karen. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you all soon.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode of Prescribing the Truth. If you loved our chat, you can find me on all the socials. Come say hi on Instagram at dr.NicholeMorris. And don't forget, I drop exclusive content on YouTube every week, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Also, I've got to tell you, if you are in need of high-quality, research-backed supplements, check out shopdrmorris.com for my full line of third-party tested, USA-made products. My Prenatal Plus is top of the line for fertility support, and if you've got little ones, grab a bottle of Kids Complete too. Lastly, if you and your husband are trying to conceive naturally without IUI or IVF, my team and I would love to support you, pray with you, and walk this journey with you. Just head over to drnicholemorris.com. That's That's Dr. Nichole Morris, Nichole with an H, to book a preconception consultation with me. Thanks for joining me today. Stay informed and God bless.